Hejsa. Jeg har fundet en måde, hvor jeg kan optage min PowerPoint på, og så lave det som et link til jer. Så får I ikke så stor en fil, I skal downloade, så det gør jeg fremover. Jeg har læst jeres noter til det her med Wilfred Owen og Lord Kitchener og Første Verdenskrig, og jeg synes, I har gjort et rigtig godt stykke arbejde. I har fanget det her med dualiteten, altså den her patriotisme, man skal kæmpe for honor and glory and your country, sat op imod realiteten ude i skyttegravene. Men jeg tænkte faktisk lige, at jeg ville gå digtet igennem, for det kan godt være sådan lidt af en mundfuld, når man sidder derhjemme og ikke lige har en lærer, der man kan spørge. Så derfor så har jeg har delt digtet op i 3 dele, så der er en slide til hver, og så slår jeg lige ned nogle forskellige steder, hvor jeg lige vil lave en lille kommentar på, hvad det er, der foregår. So the first thing is actually the title. It's called Dulce et Decorum Est, and it's Latin wording. When translated, it means it's sweet and glorious, or sometimes it's also translated into it's sweet and right to die for your country. So from just reading the title, that would be our expectation to the poem, that it's a poem about patriotism. The poem is, well, in this first stanza, it's about a group of soldiers walking along the trenches, and they're described here in the very first lines: bent double like old beggars under sags, knock-kneed, coughing like hags, we cursed through sludge. And then we know that it's not patriotic at all. He's comparing them to old beggars. He's using a simile for that, like old beggars. They're coughing like hags, again a simile. And beggars and hags, there's something that's, when it says bent double, it means they're walking, bent forward. They can't really stand up. And then he uses this line, we cursed through sludge. And I think that's really interesting way of using words to gain a certain image in someone. Because normally when thinking, we have to remember that it's from 1918, this poem. It's more than 100 years old. And the way war was displayed at that point, it wasn't with harsh images from how it actually goes on. So we would see something like battlefields and something that's green and perhaps more beautiful than it actually is. That would be the way that you would have described war before this time, before we had these poems from the World War I. And here he uses the word sludge. Sludge is something that's wet, it's horrible, it's muddy. And then he says, we cursed through it. And cursed is, he's using a verb here, but it can't really be a verb because you can't use curse as a verb for movement. But he does it anyway, and that gives it this feeling that it's the soldiers. They are cursed when they're walking there. So later on, and also he's still describing this group of soldiers, and he says, many had lost their boots, but limped on bloodshot, all went lame. And when he says that many had lost their boots, he means that in a literal way. It was difficult to maintain a uniform, and when during the war they would lose their shoes trying to keep their feet wet, or not feet warm in their trenches, and then they would lose their boots. It would be blown up or something. But even though they've lost their boots, they are still continuing on. They are walking just on their feet. When you do that in this type of area, they become bloody. And this, when he's describing something that's bloodshot, it means that the blood has coagulated in a way so it works as a shoe for them now. It's like a sole on their feet. but also by the use of shod. It's something that you do to a horse, so it's like a horseshoe. And when he says afterwards, all went lame, today we can use the word lame as like a slang word for something, but you wouldn't in 1918. You wouldn't even describe a human as lame. That's something that's connected to animal. So by using these two words, shod and lame, he's also making a connection to the soldiers being just like animals. So in this first part, he's described them as beggars, hags, and animals. So we definitely know that it's not a very patriotic poem. We'll see how it goes in the second part. Because here in the second part, we have a gas attack. World War I is known for the use of mustard gas, just like the use of trench warfare. And there is a gas, quick boys, an ecstasy of fumbling, fitting the clumsy helmets just in time. And this ecstasy of fumbling is you can really imagine these boys, the soldiers. They know what the gas does to them. They've seen it before. They've seen their buddies, their friends being killed by gas, so they know they have to hurry. So it's like an adrenaline rush that's described here, that while they're trying to fit the helmet on, the helmet of course being their gas mask. And it's also said that the helmet is clumsy, the clumsy helmet, and we know they can't really, a helmet can't be clumsy. But you can put it on in a clumsy way, definitely, if you're desperate or you're trying to hurry too much. And that's also what happens here. There is one in this group that doesn't get the mask on, and it says, "As under a green sea, I saw him drowning." And mustard gas, that was actually yellow, but when you see it through a gas mask, it has this green flare to it. So the one saying this, which is Wilfred Owen, he's just watching a friend going under in this a green sea. That green sea is the gas moving in. You can almost see how it comes in waves. The word sea makes us think that it draws our attention to how it just moves on in waves. And he sees him drowning, that he doesn't get his mask on in time. Then he moves on to saying, "In all my dreams, before my helpless sight, he plunges at me, guttering, choking, drowning." So he can't do anything, he's helpless, he can just watch helpless by. But then he says, "in all my dreams." Dreams, you would of course expect them to be nightmares to watch this, and that is probably also what he means. But it's also when he uses the word all, we know that it's not just one time he will think of this or he will have a nightmare about it. It's something that will haunt him forever. So the second part is about this gas attack, and then the poem actually changes attitude a bit in the third part of it. So let's have a look at that. Because here in the third part there is suddenly an addressee. Until now the poem has been a description of war life or this group of soldiers, but now there is a you. If in some smothering dreams you too could pace behind the wagon that we flung him in, and watch the white eyes writhing in his face, his hanged face like a devil sick of sin, if you could hear at every jolt the blood come gargling from the froth-corrupted lungs. So he says, if you could hear and if you could pace, from that we know that he's addressing it to a you who's not a part of it, someone who hasn't seen this, who haven't seen the reality of this war. And he's also describing here what happens to the soldier who was hit by the gas attack. he's put up in a wagon. Well, actually, he's not put in it. He's not placed in it. It says that we flung him in. And by using the word flung, there is also like this sort of indifference to what happens. Actually, they know he won't. They know that he will die from it. And then while he's in that wagon, they can see that every time the wagon moves and there is some kind of movement, the gas that hits the lungs, we can see that there is an effect of it. We can see that his lungs will never be the same again. It says, with every jolt, the blood come gargling from the froth corrupted lungs. So every time the wagon moves or hits a stone or something, there is blood coming out of his mouth. But let's just, it's a horrible sight. Let's just move on to this you that's in it, because it also says towards the end, my friend, you would not tell with such high zest to children ardent for some desperate glory. So what he's saying here, if the you had been in this war, if the you had seen what he has seen, heard what he had heard, then they would not try to make people join the war. So one of the in one of the earliest pieces of this poem, it was addressed to one girl named Jessie Pope, and Jessie Pope wrote propaganda poetry where she was just like the Lord Kitchener you have read, wanting to make people go to this war. And I say people, but Wilfred Owen doesn't. He says children. And by the use of the word children, there is both the fact that it was very young boys who went to war, but there is also this innocent about it, that it was boys who had never seen life, boys who weren't who hadn't tried anything yet. So that's also where we have the message of the poem, that if you know what he knows, if you have heard what he has heard, then you would not believe that war is glorious. So that was my little analysis of it, and some of the words that he uses is what makes this poem so great. It's full of similes, it's full of metaphors, symbols. The imagery is what creates it, and when you have imagery as like what bears the poem, it's the word choice that actually brings on the images. So that was World War I for us in our sinister duality. We're moving on to Victorian Age. Vi snakkes ved. Det var bare sådan en lille sum up, det her. Hej hej!